You wouldn't think that gold coins would be so confusing, and yet they sometimes can be pretty confusing. When we're talking about the differences between what we call our classic American gold coins, for shorthand, they are often called Pre-33 coins, and the modern Gold Eagle bullion coins that have been produced since about 1986 continue to be produced to this day. And hopefully you were coming from the first video in this short series where we talked about the advantages, the disadvantages, the compare and the contrast between a typical $20 Double Eagle, that's the largest gold coin that used to circulate in the United States of America, and the 1 troy ounce American Gold Eagle, that is the largest of our current gold bullion products that are produced by the United States Mint. And while they do look very similar, there are distinct differences between the two. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link down below. I encourage you to watch that video. For a lot of people, the 1 troy ounce or the 1 troy ounce adjacent pieces are the ones that they are most concerned with. If you've got the money and you've got the desire to have larger coins, those would be the two that you're looking at. But there are also fractional pieces, smaller than 1 troy ounce, that come in the American Gold Eagle series, and there are smaller coins that used to circulate in the United States of America in our pre-33 coinage. And those make an interesting option with their own set of advantages and disadvantages. So this video is going to be comparing those smaller units. If you are new to the channel, my name is Dub C, and I want to thank you for being with me here today. If you've seen a couple of my videos, this is a great opportunity for you to go ahead and click on the subscription button. I'd love to have you be part of this community, and remember, it doesn't cost anything to subscribe to a channel. It's just a way to show support for the makers of these videos. If you are one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always for being with me here. Any opportunity I have to talk about gold or silver coins, you know I'm going to jump on it. And I think that this video series, comparing and contrasting the classic pieces with the modern pieces, is long overdue. So if you have been anxiously awaiting this, I'm glad that you're here watching with me today. I like to begin my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply here trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I like to begin my videos also with a couple of terms or concepts that we can kind of fold back into the body of what we're talking about. I think that's a great way to really affect that part of your brain that's trying to understand these concepts. They will show up a little bit later in this video, and I want you to try to think about how they fit into what we're talking about. The first is a concept that is kind of a comparison in and of itself, and that is comparing the word mintage with the word population. The United States Mint and mints all over the world have compiled lists of the number of pieces that they produce at each of their mints, and we call that a mintage. Every year that a coin is made and every particular city in which a mint is located, we record those mintages. The location of the city is often called a mint mark. The United States of America has mints in Philadelphia, Denver, Colorado, and San Francisco, California. But we have had mints all over the rest of the country at various points in the country's history. And we do also have a small mint currently in West Point at New York that produces a lot of the gold bullion pieces that you may encounter. It's very important when you're looking at populations or mintages to keep in mind that the mint mark is significant. In other words, if you are looking at a reference like the Red Book, and this is a book that I cannot stress is important if you are interested in pursuing coins of any type, whether they're modern bullion pieces or classic pieces. The Red Book, an inexpensive guide, it comes out every single year. It's spiral bound and it costs about $20. You can get it at a local coin shop, you can get it online at Amazon or other sources. But if we're looking at pieces like these gold coins, the mintage, you see that first column there, simply tells you the number of pieces that were made in a particular year in a particular city. That top number, we're seeing 1877, you see a mintage there of 397,650. That is a Philadelphia. We know that because it doesn't show a mint mark, and Philadelphia is our main mint. But immediately beneath that, you see the CC. That stands for Carson City, Nevada. And in Carson City, we only made 42,565. So even though they are the same year, you can see that the mint mark is very significant. We're talking about a population or a mintage about 1/10 as many versus the Philadelphia mint. So a mintage, the number of pieces made in a year and a particular city representing a mint, for each coin that you're looking at, that is the mintage. Compare that with a population. When we're talking about populations, we're talking about the number of pieces that have been graded by a third-party grader. And hopefully, if you're on this journey with me, you understand the concept of a third-party grader. As a really brief synopsis, these hard-shelled plastic cases that you see here are what we in the industry call slabs. They're also simply called holders. And the idea is that you submit your coin to a reputable third-party grader, and they are completely independent of you. And for a small fee, they will examine your coin, they will attest to its authenticity, and they will assign that coin a grade based on the amount of wear that coin has seen in circulation. These third-party graders also keep very, very good records about the number of pieces that they have seen for every year and mint mark, and they also indicate the grades for which they have seen these pieces. For an example like this is a 1928 Philadelphia. Again, there's no P. Sometimes we do see a P for Philadelphia. 1928 $20 Saint-Gaudens piece in MS65 condition. You can go to NGC's website. This is an NGC slab or holder. And they will tell you exactly how many pieces they have graded from the 1928 Philadelphia $20 Saint-Gaudens Double Eagle in mint state 65 condition. This is a mint state 65 piece. Those populations can be as significant as the number of pieces that were ever minted, a mintage report, because not every coin has survived, and not every coin has survived in a high state of preservation. So if you are starting to get involved in the value of coins that goes beyond their intrinsic value, their gold value, and you're starting to look at the collectability value or that extrinsic value, mintages are important. Populations are just as important in a lot of regards. So we'll talk about those a little bit later as we get a little bit further deeper into this video. And then the second concept I wanted to bounce off you is the idea of Pre-33. We throw that around a lot, and if you don't understand it, it's perfectly fine. I'll give you a really quick definition of it. From the time the United States of America was founded in the 1700s up until 1933, we spent gold coins. We didn't spend them that often. If you were coming from the first video, you remember me saying that the largest circulating gold coin in the United States has been these $20 double eagles. A single eagle or just an eagle is a $10 gold piece. So this is a double eagle, a $20 gold piece. But when these were circulating from about 1850 to 1932, they had a value of somewhere between maybe $300 to $500 in our modern current American currency. And we don't spend $300 to $500 on a regular basis without going into electronic forms of payment. So these weren't the kinds of things that circulated very often. But they were still legal tender gold coins. These were still the pieces that would have circulated if there was a need for it. The $20 is the largest of those pieces. But the United States of America has produced many other size gold coins going back in our history. The ones that we encounter most often, especially if you're just looking at the gold value, would be the $20 gold piece, the $10 gold piece. This is an example of a $5 gold piece. Let me see if I can bring it into focus on it. And this is an example of a $2.50 gold piece. Now, the 2.5 seems a little bit incongruous, but you have to remember that we're talking about halving everything from 20 to 10 to 5 to 2.5. In that context, it does kind of make sense. So these are the coins that circulated up until 1933. In 1933, it was technically May of 1933, or rather April 5th of 1933. The president issued a presidential order, an executive order called 6102, and that removed gold circulating coinage from our circulation. No longer was paper currency going to be backed by gold coins. It was still backed by silver in some circumstances, but we also just had fiat currency, that is currency that's not backed by anything, which is the currency that we use today. So up until 1933, the gold coins circulated and they were considered part of America's currency. This was simply what was spent. So when we're talking about pre-33, we are talking about the $20, $10, the $5, and the $2.50 gold pieces generally. Now, there were other denominations that were used. We had, for example, an incredibly rare $4 gold piece that saw very little circulation and rumors that it was just passed around between the mistresses of Congress, of the Congress people. There was a $3 gold piece, also not used very often. This is an example of an American $1 gold piece. You can see just how tiny that is when you compare it to my fingernail. So when we're talking about gold buying, gold stacking, holding physical precious metals, we generally don't talk about those more scarce items. Those really have more numismatic value, coin collector value. You wouldn't stack $1 gold pieces. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They contain about 1/20th of a troy ounce of gold, which today, with the market of gold being worth somewhere around $2,700 per troy ounce, you could see that that piece would have somewhere around $130, $140 worth of gold, but they may run you $200, $300, $400. So those pieces wouldn't make a lot of sense as a way to own physical gold. For the sake of this video, and for most of the people who stack precious metals, when we think about pre-1933, we're thinking about late 1800s to early 1900s, $20, $10, $5, and in some cases $2.50 gold pieces. It's really just those four. You're welcome to stack anything you want. You're welcome to bridge that gap between precious metal stacking and coin collecting, something that I've always been passionate about. But for the sake of this video and the arguments that we make here, $20, $10, $5, and $2.50 gold pieces. Really probably just the top three there. So let's talk a little bit about why you would want these pieces. Then we'll talk a little bit about the last video, just give it a quick recap. We'll talk about the differences and the similarities between these smaller pieces, be they the Pre-33 or the modern American Gold Eagle series. And we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and finally I'll wrap this up with some tips, some of my suggestions if these are items that you want to pursue. Why would you want these smaller items? Well, I said in the last video that the $20 gold piece is really close to 1 troy ounce of gold. It's 0.9675. That's of a troy ounce. That's really close to a full troy ounce. And the American Gold Eagle $50 piece, the 1 ounce version, is obviously 1 troy ounce of gold as well. So those are really kind of the primary pieces that people who are serious about holding physical gold would want. But the advantages to the smaller pieces, among many, the top two that I like to talk about are the ability to dollar cost average, and they offer a little bit more divisibility. Dollar cost averaging just means being able to set aside maybe a smaller amount on a regular basis and buy these smaller units, so you're not spending that full $2,700 or whatever gold is trading for while you're watching this video. Remember that gold is an internationally traded commodity, and the price could be significantly higher or significantly lower when you're watching this video. But if you're talking about a $20 gold piece, or if you're talking about a full troy ounce American Gold Eagle, you're talking somewhere in the area of about $2,700, give or take, and that can be a heavy lift for some people. When you start looking at the smaller units, you immediately go to somewhere around half that much, all the way down to about a tenth as much. And that becomes a lot more affordable for a lot of people. If you're one of those people, stand by. This will be interesting. I think you will find this enlightening. So you have the ability to dollar cost average on a smaller amount. Regularly investing a smaller amount helps you avoid huge increases in price, but also capture the price when it's very low. That's the entire concept of dollar cost averaging. I think it makes a lot of sense. If you really need to, check with a financial advisor and ask them about the benefits of dollar cost averaging. And the second key point that I wanted to make was about its divisibility, and that's kind of dollar cost averaging in reverse. If you have nothing but 1 troy ounce units, be it a $20 gold piece or a modern American Gold Eagle, and you need to sell this item, you have to exit the entire vehicle. You have to sell the entire coin. You can't sell part of a coin, which means that if you were able to buy these pieces at a really high price, and you have to sell to tap into at least some of the money contained within these, and gold has dropped quite a bit, you are really facing a pretty heavy loss on every single gram of gold contained within those pieces. So you start to recognize that there are some advantages to having these smaller units if you only need to tap into a little bit of amount of the money of the gold that's contained within them. You can sell a portion that you need and not worry about having to sell the entire vehicle. That's the concept behind divisibility. two of the main key points why I do like some smaller units, and we'll talk more about those as we start to look at the specifics of these. To recap the last video, we talked about the idea of the classic pieces, and all of these contain the same alloy that the classic $20 American Double Eagle contains. They are 90% pure. The balance, 10% copper. There has been a little bit of silver added into these over time, but when you're looking at references like the Red Book, it will tell you 90% gold, 10% copper. That is how we see these pre-33 pieces. The American Gold Eagles, 91.67% pure gold. Recall from the last video that is 22 karat gold. So the difference in purity is slight, but it is significant. We're talking about 90% versus 91.67%. The actual gold weight is one of the key things that we talked about in the last video, and that is when you're comparing coins of different purity, you don't really care how much those coins weigh because they contain alloys, typically in the case of the American classic pieces, again, copper. In the case of the American Gold Eagles, a little bit of copper, a little bit of silver. But we don't really care about the metals that the gold is alloyed with. We are concerned with how much gold they contain, and that's the concept of the actual gold weight. For a $20 Gold Eagle, we already said that that was 0.9675 of a troy ounce. For the American Gold Eagle Bullion series, that is exactly 1 troy ounce. They weigh a little bit more than a troy ounce to account for the small amount of copper and silver that they're alloyed with. So you're always going to get the exact measure for which you are supposed to get, whether it's 1 ounce, 1/2 ounce, a 1/4 ounce, or a 1/10 ounce. They have a different face value. We didn't talk about that too much in the last video. And it really has to do with that non-circulating legal tender idea, which is a little bit bizarre. We do give these items a face value, even though we know full well that these will never be spent for their face value. We talked about the different municipalities that may tax these differently. Some municipalities assign a higher tax or a lower tax, depending on whether or not something has a face value. You might want to check with your local accountant or somebody who's a little bit more versed in exactly where you are in the world, whether or not that makes a difference. But since we compared and contrast the $20 Double Eagle to the American Gold Eagle Bullion coin, these have a $20 face value, while these have a $50 face value. Is that confusing? It's one of the things we didn't really talk about, but you see right there it says $50. Again, you would never spend these for $50 if they have roughly $2,700 worth of gold in them. It's an idiosyncrasy, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But it is a difference between the two, $20 versus $50. Strange, right? We also have the difference in age. 1850 for these pieces versus from 1986 on. So these 1850 to 1932-ish, these 1986 into the present. They continue to make these to this day. So that's a recap of the $50 Gold Eagle versus the $20 Double Eagle, the classic pieces. And we see similar ideas going for the smaller pieces as well. We'll talk about those. The subsidiary pieces, the Pre-33, the ones that are smaller than a full troy ounce, I'm particularly fond of the $10, and this is an example of a different series. From 1850 to about 1907, we made coins that had this Liberty design on it. That's what she's called, the Liberty series. From 1907, we had a series that was the same size, the same weight, the same purity, but it had a different design. We call that the Indian, or the Indian headdress, or the Indian head gold. This is a $10 gold coin. This is a $10 gold coin. This is slightly earlier. This is slightly later. So the $10 pieces, they have as much gold as you would expect. Remember, these are all 90% pure. The $10 gold piece actual gold weight is 0.484 of a troy ounce. We talked before about how the $20 gold piece, not exactly 1 full troy ounce. By comparison, the $10 gold piece, not exactly half a troy ounce, but it's quite close. 0.484 of a troy ounce. Now that is the actual gold weight. That's the amount of gold contained within. Again, these are a 90% gold alloy. We're not so concerned about the copper, so the gold weight of these, 0.484 of a troy ounce. The next smaller unit is the $5 gold piece. And again, we have a Liberty style and we have an American Indian style also. They are the same weight, the same shape, the same form, just a different design. the Liberty, $5 Liberty, and the Indian $5 gold piece contain 0.242 of a troy ounce. And we're talking about fractions of a troy ounce. That follows, right? About 1 ounce, about 1/2 ounce, about 1/4 of a troy ounce. Again, it's not exact, and that is one of the shortcomings of the Pre-33. But it's very close, and if you're really just kind of interested in accumulating some gold and you're not specifically interested in a very precise 1 troy ounce vehicle, these have an interesting ability to help you get there with still having a little bit of historical significance, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And the smallest gold coin that is sometimes considered to be a gold vehicle as well, when we're talking about the Pre-33 pieces, is the $2.50 gold piece. Again, a slightly strange denomination when you're thinking about it in terms of American coinage. 0.121 of a troy ounce. So what's significant about that is that it's roughly 1/10 of a troy ounce. You can see that that actually works out pretty well. Roughly 1 ounce, roughly 1/2 ounce, roughly 1/4 of an ounce, and roughly 1/10 of a troy ounce. They do make sense in that context. Again, they are 90% pure gold. We were talking about the amount of gold that they contain, though, so keep that in mind. The American Gold Eagles, by comparison, a little bit more straightforward. We have the 1 troy ounce, we have the 1/2 troy ounce, we have the 1/4 troy ounce, and we have the 1/10 troy ounce. Again, they are also an alloy, but that is their actual gold weight. Each one of them contains exactly that measure of pure gold in the form of a slightly alloyed gold coin. So it makes a lot more sense from that kind of mathematical figure. If you're talking about having precise amounts in your mind, if these are the precise amounts that you want to stack, the American Gold Eagle's a little bit easier to calculate. I mentioned in the last video that I keep all of my precious metals holdings in a simple Excel file, and I just kind of calculate once in those columns, and then I know precisely how much my actual gold weight is. But it is something to consider, the fact that these are not precise increments. So the advantages and disadvantages of both. The Pre-33s, and I think that some of them are really esoteric, right? This is really what you prefer to stack. I mentioned the beauty of some of these pieces. This design also by Saint-Gaudens. Don't let that confuse you. He was just the designer of this piece. That is a $10 gold piece. Some people think that these are some of the most beautiful coins that America has ever produced. I think it's not a bad idea to spend a little bit of time looking at these pieces and recognizing that they are beautiful pieces of American history, and that means something, right? They do have history from about 1850 to about 1932. So you're talking about pieces that are somewhere in the 100 years old to maybe even 125, 150-year-old. That's very significant. I think that's very interesting. That's something that shouldn't be overlooked. They have numismatic potential. Now, potential is potential. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can say for sure that these pieces will increase in value because of their collectability. But if you're talking about just random date, typical American Gold Eagles, they have significantly less potential when it comes to numismatic potential. So I think that's something that is at least worthy considering. There's something very cool about them too. And I think that stacking precious metals can be fun, and it should be fun if that leads you to having a full-fledged collection. This is a great entree into that kind of thing. I love classic pieces. I love the history behind them. I love thinking about what they've seen. And if that is of interest to you too, don't discount that. That is a really kind of a neat thing. You just don't really have that with the American Gold Eagle program. Some of the disadvantages of Pre-33 pieces. They often have a higher premium. We talked about premium in the last video. That's the amount over the value of the precious metals that you have to pay in order to acquire these pieces. So it's not uncommon to have to pay a higher premium. For that reason, I don't usually suggest the $2.50 gold pieces. Those seem to have a significant premium. Typically, the smaller the unit, the higher the premium per troy ounce. We will definitely talk about that a little bit later. So they are higher premiums sometimes, but as I noted in the last video, the premiums on classic pre-1933 $20 gold pieces in particular is incredibly low right now. That may not be the case when you're watching the video, but as I'm recording this, they have fallen to a low that we have not seen in many years. So your mileage may vary. This might be the right time to be considering these pre-33 pieces. Their liquidity. They're not quite as liquid as the modern American gold pieces. You won't find buyers as ready to buy these, or if you do, you may have to spend a little bit more time talking about the scarcity, the mintages, the condition of these pieces. Whereas these pieces, generally speaking, if you're going to sell these to a qualified dealer, they will immediately quote you a price and you can either agree or disagree. So these pieces maybe not quite as liquid as the American Gold Eagle program. That's something to definitely consider. And also, some of these pieces were created in the mid-20th century, not as a means of fooling collectors, but as a way to get acceptable gold back into the United States of America. Remember, we had Executive Order 6102 that banned, or at least severely limited, gold ownership. And one of the ways around that was that counterfeit gold pieces, even those pieces made out of real good quality gold, found their way into this country. And I've done entire video series about that as well. I'll leave that down below. Counterfeit Gold Coins Volumes 2 and 3 in particular talk about some of the most commonly encountered counterfeit gold coins that are made out of solid gold, but are not real United States gold coins. It's something to consider. It's something that you should probably be concerned with. There are some remedies for that as well. I'll talk about those in a moment. The Gold American Eagle, the advantages of those. They have more modern dates, just as I talked about in the last video. If you've got a birthday, a christening, a bar mitzvah, an anniversary, graduation, and you want something that has a current date or a date going back to the 1980s, you will probably be able to find the American Gold Eagle programs, the coins that are issued in this program with that corresponding date. Probably not going to happen with a series that ended in the 1930s. So I think that's an advantage, but you might think of it as a disadvantage, right? That's the beauty of something that's produced now versus something that has a little bit more history to it. You might want to consider that a disadvantage. Right now, the premiums on these pieces seems to be much higher, and that is an anomaly. That is not something we expect, so maybe a little bit of a disadvantage there too. These tend to be a little bit more liquid. We just talked about how these pieces tend to be a little bit less liquid. When and if it comes time to sell, these will probably be pretty easy to offload. These may be a little bit more difficult, not terribly, but I want to be as complete and thorough as I possibly can be. So in terms of liquidity, a little bit more liquid, a little bit less liquid. And the general disadvantages. The premiums on these pieces, like I just noted, have become quite high, and that may change over time, and it may change very quickly. But just as an example, as I'm taping this video right now, gold at 27.8502 per troy ounce, you're looking at one of the bullion dealers, the most commonly encountered online bullion dealers. And you can see, you've circled the gold price on their own website, so you can see what price they are working off of. They have currently 1/10 troy ounce random date American Gold Eagles. These would be examples of those types of gold eagles. Each one of those, if we're just extrapolating based on the price of gold that they're showing on their own website, would contain about $278.50 worth of gold. Easy enough to figure. One of the nice things about these simple increments, right? It's 1/10, $278.50. But you can see that they are currently charging $353.49 a piece for those. That means you're paying $74 to $75 in premium for a 1/10 troy ounce. Again, if we extrapolate backwards, you're talking about paying a $750 per ounce premium because it would take 10 of these to make a full troy ounce. So the premiums on the American Gold Eagles right now seem to be quite high. Always keep in mind that the smaller the unit, generally speaking, the higher the premium per troy ounce. And that is a great definition of that. Now, it could be significantly smaller on the 1 troy ounce, and it could be significantly smaller even on the 1/2 and the 1/4 troy ounce. But keep in mind, those premiums can really knock down your gold budget. Premium is definitely something to keep in mind. And then these pieces, not especially collectible, right? I mentioned before that these pieces at least have a little bit of numismatic potential. These pieces, not so much. But if that's not really what you're after, if you don't want to figure that into your calculations, if you don't really care about it, there's nothing wrong with the American Gold Eagles, trusted and true. But there's probably not much of a collector base because these are still made in very large quantities and they will never circulate, so they're never going to get worn down. Consequently, the populations of these pieces is really consistent with the mintages in the first place. Very few of these pieces will ever fall below mint state 60 to 70. Really, honestly, probably not further below than maybe mint state 67. There's also just not very much history with them. And at the risk of sounding like a coin collector, I just don't find them as interesting, right? These pieces with the history behind them, I am fascinated with. These pieces are gold, and I love gold, but there is just a little bit, maybe a little bit of shallowness to these pieces. Nothing wrong if you're just after the gold. Again, the liquidity of that makes up in a lot of ways for the history offered in these Pre-33 pieces. And I mentioned that I would give you at least some of the tips that I use. Your mileage on these may vary also. So keep in mind, I can't possibly predict where you are, where you're buying from, but generally speaking, this is what I found to be true. I like the classic pieces that are certified. A lot of that has to do with the counterfeits that are out there. The counterfeits typically seem to be worse for the $5 and the $2.50 Indian series. That's this piece and this piece. The reason why I don't really recommend those pieces unless they are certified by a reputable third-party grader, again, my favorites, PCGS, NGC, and CAC. So there are counterfeits, but there are not that many of them out there for the $20 gold pieces, fewer for the $10 gold pieces, although they still should be at least a little bit of a concern. And because of that, I like these pieces to be certified. The classic pieces, a reputable third-party grader, I would look at grades that are somewhere between maybe AU 55. We grade coins on the Sheldon grading scale of 1 to 70. So these would be 55 to maybe 63-ish, somewhere in there. The higher, the better. Try to get the higher grade for a lower premium. That's always going to be one of the best tips. The $2.50 Liberties, of which I don't even have an example here. I'll show you a picture of one of them. And the $2.50 Indians tend to be quite expensive. So if you decide that you want to pursue these and you are buying these pieces that are graded by a third-party grader, expect their premiums to be significant. Often these trade for 2 or even 2.5 to 3 times the value of the gold contained within. We're not talking about a small percentage. We're talking about hundreds of percent. So that's one of the reasons why I don't really suggest the $2.50 gold pieces, be they the Indian series or the Liberty series. They're just too high of a premium. That is much more of a collectible piece, not so much of a gold ownership piece. The $10 Indians, on the other hand, tend to be a really good favorite. This is a really nice size. Again, very close to 1/2 of a troy ounce. And these, the Saint-Gaudens style, can be found pretty easily. And I said that I would compare and contrast the idea of mintages with population reports. Let's take a look at the PCGS $10 Indian population report. The nice thing about this is it tells you how many pieces they have graded per year and per mint market. If you're looking at that right now, check out all of those figures, right? You're looking at the mintages, you're looking at the mint marks, but look all the way down at the bottom. You can see the 1932. PCGS alone has graded 66,670 uncirculated examples of the 1932s. So while it's not going to have a whole lot of numismatic value, they are an interesting way of buying an uncirculated piece that is close to 100 years old. And the fact that they have graded so many of them, and PCGS has just graded those pieces themselves, but NGC and CAC have also graded a significant number of those. These pieces will have a very low premium versus their numismatic value, and this is a great way to buy these pieces. Keep those population reports in mind. Use that in reverse also, and that's a nice tip. If you're being offered by an online bullion dealer or a local coin dealer, your choice between a piece that has a very high population and a piece that is the same grade, the same certification company, but has a very low population, I would tend to go for the lowest population. Use that to your advantage, right? Keep those in mind, those population reports. You can wind up getting some pieces that are fairly scarce, and if you've got the opportunity, all things equal, the price, the condition, the third-party grader, I would definitely go towards the lower population piece. That's going to benefit you in the long run. The American Gold Eagles, you can buy those certified also. And I mentioned in the last video when we're talking about the full-size pieces, I like these pieces certified also. Some people would say that this is an opportunity for you to forget all about certification. These are nothing but a way to own gold, and therefore there is no reason to have them certified. Obviously, I've got examples that are not certified of these as well. But again, all things being equal, I would rather have one of these pieces certified as an MS69 or an MS70. Those are the two grades that I would stick to for the American Gold Eagles. I would rather have them certified because that makes it easier to sell. This is an example of a $10 American Gold Eagle graded MS69 by PCGS. And if you can find these for the same price as pieces that haven't been slabbed, that haven't been placed in a holder by a third-party grader, I would get the graded pieces because there's value in that. It costs between $30 and $50 to have a coin graded. For gold coins, it can be significantly higher than that. So if you're able to kind of get that value and the authentication and the grade on these pieces, that will make them easier to sell in the future, and it's not going to cost you any more. Think about getting those pieces graded. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive to have modern gold pieces graded, but if I have the opportunity, and I call that Dub C's choice, if you're given the choice between a raw piece and a piece that's been graded by a reputable third-party grader with a significantly higher grade, 69 or 70, and they're the same price, I'm definitely going to go for the slabbed piece. That's just an idiosyncrasy of me, but think about the benefits of having those slab pieces. I think it will help you in the long run also. Buy local when you can. Whether you're looking at the modern pieces or the pre-33 pieces, if you've got the opportunity to compare and contrast coins by the same grader and you're looking at them eye to eye, and you can see the fronts, the backs, look at the bag marks, the handling marks, look at the condition, look at the luster of the coin. I like the idea of being able to have those pieces in my hand and spend a few minutes. Believe me, your dealer's not going to mind, especially if they eventually make a sale. Take a little bit of time, look at the piece, and decide on the one that you like best. There's always a benefit in doing that. You will be much happier with your purchase if you can do that. And finally, I think that my favorite sweet spot, and this may be completely different, this is just Dub C's choice. When it comes to classic pieces, when it comes to the American Gold Eagles, I like the quarter-ounce fractional versions of them. And that's why I've got these $5 Liberties laid out. I have stacks of these. These are one of my all-time favorite gold vehicles because the premiums on these tend to be quite low. The counterfeits for these are much less significant than they are for the Indian series. And that reason, I don't mind buying these uncertified. If you are new to precious metals, get the certified versions, even if it costs you a few dollars more. You want to make sure that you've got a piece that hasn't been heavily cleaned, harshly cleaned. You want a piece that's authentic. You want a piece that's been graded. If you have your sea legs under you and you're a little bit more comfortable, the $5 Indians, I think, check all of the boxes for that dollar cost averaging, for that divisibility. For the same reason, I've got a plenty of these 1/4 American Gold Eagles. I like that increment. That makes a lot of sense to me. If you're talking about $2,700 per troy ounce, you're talking somewhere around $700 a piece, somewhere in that area, $650 to $700. That is a manageable premium or a manageable amount of money, whether you're buying or selling. So to me, at least, I like these fractional 1/4-ish or 1/4 exactly units. You can probably see the advantages of those as well. There we go. I think we've had a pretty good discussion about not just the $20 gold pieces and not just the full troy ounce American Gold Eagle programs, but the smaller fractional units of each of those series. We talked about the positives and negatives. I gave you some tips to think about. What are your favorites? Which ones do you like the best? Do you have any interest in the pre-33s? Do you want to stick with these straightforward, easy to understand, easy to buy and sell American Gold Eagle programs? There is no right or wrong, but man, I do drift a little bit more in this direction. Let me know which one's your favorite. Let me know which ones you are most interested in stacking. If you have questions about anything that we talked about here today, remember, I'm fond of saying if you've got a question, there's a good chance somebody else watching has that same question. Let's see if we can answer it for everybody. If you have any suggestions of other videos you'd like to see me make, whether it's in the world of precious metals or rare coins, leave that comment down below. And if I make a video or maybe even a video series based on your suggestion, I'll give you a great big shout out. Once again, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet subscribed. Love to have you be part of this community. Keep in mind that I premiere videos most Friday evenings, and I'm often there during the premiere to answer questions, and sometimes we even go live afterwards in a live stream. That's a lot of fun to be able to have a little bit of a deeper dive, to talk to some of the other people that are in this stacking community or whatever you want to call it. So join me on Friday evenings for video premieres and stick around to see if I'm actually going to go live afterwards. Those are a lot of fun, a great way to start the weekend. Always be learning, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.